bald werden Sie hier stehen, wo wir jetzt stehen.
Sophie Scholl was a monumental 20-year-old during the 1940s. She was in a resistance group called the White Rose with her brother Hans and other students at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich. There they distributed leaflets to spread the word about their anti-Nazi group, hoping to convince German citizens to rebel.
Throughout Sophie Scholl's difficult journey against Hitler, she never stopped advocating for an end to the Nazi regime. Although her long and hard fight against the Nazis resulted in her capture and execution, her death and martyrdom inspired many German citizens to join the fight against their corrupt government.
But to understand why she put the lives of the White Rose members at risk, we must first realize what caused her to have these beliefs opposing Hitler and his gang of Nazis.
Sophie Scholl was born on May 9, 1921 in the small town of Forchenberg, Germany, to parents Robert and Magdalena Scholl.
Like many other German children at the time, Sophie enrolled in the League of German Girls. At first, she enjoyed this organization and was even promoted to squad leader. However, she soon started to realize that the League of German Girls reflected a government that wasn't what it seemed.
Sophie started opposing Hitler and the Nazi regime and feared that Germany had become a dictatorship.
This realization was influenced by her father, who happened to be Burgermeister or mayor of their city, but lost his political position because he didn't agree with Hitler's ways. At this time, her brother Hans was also arrested for taking part in the German youth movement, which finalized her controversial opinion on the Nazis.
In 1940, Sophie barely graduated from secondary school. There, her grades suffered because many of the topics were biased towards Hitler.
She really did hate it there. One of her quotes was, "Sometimes school seems like a film to me. I look on, but for all intents and purposes, I'm excluded from performing."
Later, in 1941, she was forced to work at a camp. She wrote in one journal entry regarding the camp, "We live like prisoners. Not only work, but leisure time is turned into duty hours. Sometimes I want to scream, 'My name is Sophie Scholl. Don't you forget it.'"
By this point in her life, Sophie was done being of help to the Nazis and Hitler. She knew that she couldn't just stand by and watch as countless innocents were being imprisoned from France all the way to the Soviet Union, Germany's enemy at the time, where the Nazis stopped invading. However, she had no idea how she was supposed to stop them. She was just one girl after all.
Although Sophie didn't know how to put an end to Hitler, she at least was certain that she couldn't stay at the work camp. In May of 1942, she enrolled at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, where her brother was attending as well.
During one of her classes, she found a leaflet under her desk published by the White Rose anti-Nazi group. She was immediately reassured to find out that others shared a strong opinion of the Nazis.
2 more leaflets appeared in June of 1942, and a hint of recognition sparked within her as she realized her brother might be part of the White Rose. At first, Hans claimed to have nothing to do with the group in order to protect Sophie, but finally gave in and told her all about the White Rose and their cause, as well as admitting that he and his friend Alex Schwarmel were the ones who founded the group and wrote the pamphlets.
Sophie insisted to be a part of her brother's group and help spread the ugly truth of what the Nazis and Hitler were doing to prisoners, and how, if the Germans weren't careful, their once proud nation would be in a state of distress.
More members joined the White Rose, including students Will Graff and Christoph Probst, a professor named Kurt Huber, and more.
Unfortunately, though, the group was suddenly put on hold when Hans, Will, and Alex were sent to Russia to serve as combat medics on the eastern front of Hitler's campaign. In the 3 months they were there, they saw the way Nazis treated Russian prisoners, and they felt a whole new level of hate towards the Nazis.
Meanwhile, Sophie went back home to tend to her sick mother while her father was spending time in prison for making harsh remarks regarding Hitler.
Although their family was under suspicion, Sophie didn't let that stop her from making bad remarks about Hitler. The book Sophie Scholl says that Sophie told a friend, "If Hitler came walking by right now and I had a pistol, I would shoot. If the men don't do it, then a woman will have to. You have to do something to avoid being guilty yourself."
In August, she started a required work service at a factory in Ulm. She hated helping Hitler and even worked very slowly to slow down the factory itself.
Some of her co-workers were forced laborers from Russia. She wrote, "This spiritless, lifeless work, purely mechanical. These tiny little pieces whose whole we don't know, whose purpose is horrible. The work affects you not so much physically as mentally. Clearly, seeing the way the prisoners were treated did not improve the way she felt about Hitler.
By November 1942, Sophie and Hans were back at the university, planning on upcoming verbal attacks.
In January of 1943, the White Rose started a new leaflet which talked about civil rights.
On February 18, 1943, Sophie and Hans brought a suitcase filled with 6 leaflets addressed to fellow students to the main lecture hall of Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich.
Classes would be coming to an end soon, so Hans insisted that they left quickly.
But Sophie had another idea in mind. There were still a few hundred pamphlets left out of the 10,000 that they made, and she refused to leave until distributing every last one. Sophie hurried up the stairs to get to the second floor where they had not put any pamphlets. Just as she set down the last few flyers, the bell rang. Although she and Hans could have escaped, Sophie then had the impulsive decision to shove the leaflets off the banister and to the lecture hall.
The janitor downstairs witnessed Sophie committing this crime, so he immediately stopped her and Hans from leaving and called the Gestapo.
The Gestapo came to look into it, and Robert Moore, the lead interrogator, almost let them go, suspecting that because they were such calm and well-rounded children, that they weren't a part of the White Rose.
However, the Gestapo realized that the leaflets in the university fit perfectly in Sophie's suitcase, and they were arrested.
Hans and Sophie denied their involvement with the White Rose during their individual interrogations.
Throughout this all, Sophie stayed calm and never let her fear show.
They were so close, but just as things started to brighten up, the Gestapo searched their apartments. During the second search, they found stamps and a letter from Probst that linked to the same leaflet that Hans had on him when he was arrested. Hans confessed before Sophie did, so she could have easily played it safe and agreed with him.
But that's not what she did. Instead, she admitted. She told the guard that she was proud of what she did. The guard offered her a lenient verdict in return for information, but Sophie wouldn't give in because she didn't want to bring down others with her.
In fact, she even told the guard that she should not be treated any less harshly than Hans because she was a woman.
This was yet another extreme act of courage. The Gestapo was prepared to make a deal with her, but she stayed selfless and did not risk the lives of the White Rose members.
Sophie, 21 years old, Hans, 24, and Christoph, 23, were all found guilty of treason and were beheaded 3 hours later.
Although she died, her effect on the protest against Adolf Hitler stayed alive.
Copies of the 7th leaflet were smuggled out of Germany and given to Allied troops who reproduced them and dropped them from planes all over the country.
Millions of them showed up everywhere. This time, there was no getting away from the White Rose.
It launched a whole new movement, and Sophie's legacy lived on. She was a martyr, exchanging her life to get the ball rolling in a revolutionary movement.
Last words were a huge example of this. They were, "Such a fine, sunny day, and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?"
A hero is defined by Webster's dictionary as one who shows great courage. They are revolutionaries, admired not only for their actions but for their character. Sophie Scholl is no doubt this.
By pushing the leaflets off of the stairwell, she stepped up, putting her life on the line to defend her beliefs in a time when it was incredibly rare to do so.
By doing this, she implemented change all over the world, launching a movement that contributed to the end of World War II and Hitler's regime.
Even now, 74 years later, she represents someone who sacrifices for what they believe in, a trait we all aspire to have.
Her ending result was one that was brave and monumental.
Sophie Scholl was a hero.